In the 1900s, black codes and Jim Crow laws enforced racial segregation in New Orleans and elsewhere in the South. Employment opportunities for blacks, particularly women, were extremely limited. For light-skinned women in New Orleans, working at a high-end brothel was an avenue for earning a living. Prostitution was legal in Storyville, a 10-block square section of New Orleans. A few high-end brothels in New Orleans' Storyville red light district featured female octoroons, women who were billed as 7/8 white and 1/8 black. These high-end brothels catered exclusively to wealthy white men. The main attraction was access to light-skinned women for the sole purpose of sexual fulfillment. Lulu White and Willie Piazza were two of the most prominent and influential madams in New Orleans in the early 1900s. White and Piazza presided over their brothels in a manner that drew wealthy white men to New Orleans and specifically to the red light district known as Storyville. Lulu White owned the famous brothel Mahogany Hall. Both madams owned high-end brothels on Basin Street in the red light district known as Storyville. Storyville existed for 20 years. It was created in 1897 and closed in 1917. Storyville was created in 1897 by the city of New Orleans in order to concentrate prostitution in one 10-square block area of the city that could be easily patrolled by police. The area had previously been known for crime, prostitution, and gambling. There were already well-established brothels on Basin Street. Storyville was closed in 1917 by order of the federal government to protect nearby military personnel from venereal disease. Basin Street was where the high-end brothels were located. These high-end brothels were located in mansions. Both Lulu White and Willie Piazza built their own mansions on Basin Street out of which they ran their high-end brothels. Each madam spent over $1 million in today's dollars on their mansions. Lulu White's brothel was located at 235 North Basin Street, while Willie Piazza's brothel was located at 317 North Basin Street. Both brothels were filled with glittering chandeliers, art and expensive furniture, and Jelly Roll Morton and other famous musicians regularly entertained at the piano. White and Piazza were both mixed-race women known as mulattoes. Mulattoes have one parent who is white and the other parent who is black. Lulu White was born Lulu Hendley in 1868 in Selma, Alabama. Her father was white and her mother was black. Willie Piazza was born in 1865 in Copiah County, Mississippi. Her father was Italian Vincent Piazza and her mother was African-American Celia Caldwell. By law, these high-end brothels catered exclusively to white men. Both madams operated brothels that catered specifically to wealthy white men. The most sought-after courtesans of the Storyville era were the Octoroons, young women who attested to be of primarily European descent and a bit of African descent. A lot of these women could pass for white. In general, wealthy white men had a sexual craving for light-skinned females. To these men, Octoroon women may have possessed the socially desirable looks of whiteness. They also inherited the savagery, depravity, and sexual desires falsely ascribed to blackness. Both Lulu White and Willie Piazza became millionaires by providing wealthy white men with light-skinned prostitutes who allowed them to live out a racial and sexual fantasy. The brothels of both madams featured women who were billed as octoroons or 7/8 white and 1/8 black. Both madams described themselves and the women who worked for them as octoroons. Lulu White's Mahogany Hall was one of the most famous brothels in the country. Wealthy and influential men from all over the country visited Mahogany Hall. Lulu White called her brothel the Octoroon Parlor. She called herself Diamond Queen of the Demi-Monde. There were 40 light-skinned women on site at Mahogany Hall. Willie Piazza was known as Countess Willie Piazza and could easily pass for white. Piazza's girls were known around New Orleans for their fine clothes, private coaches, and for their abilities to sing and play musical instruments. Willie Piazza was a regal woman who lived up to her nickname, sophisticated, intelligent, elegant, and always fashionably dressed. She sported a monocle, smoked Russian cigarettes held in a diamond-studded ivory and gold holder, wore a diamond choker, and spoke 4 languages fluently. By hiring light-skinned women and accommodating interracial sex, both brothels violated New Orleans segregation laws. New Orleans' own the Daily Picayune was specifically concerned about sex across the color line. Both madams were condemned by the city. White and Piazza paid huge bribes to city officials in order to stay open. The other high-end brothels in Storyville were run by white madams who hired white prostitutes. In 1917, the city of New Orleans passed Ordinance 4118. The ordinance was a reaction to the federal government's threat to shutter Storyville altogether due to concerns about military personnel and venereal disease. Ordinance 4118 required the removal of all sex workers of African descent from the most established and lucrative portions of Storyville to the much less profitable uptown section. Lulu White and Willie Piazza had a lot invested in their Basin Street brothels and resisted Ordinance 4118's mandate. White and Piazza fought the city ordinance in court and ultimately won in the Supreme Court of Louisiana. The court ruled in their favor in City of New Orleans v. Willie v. Piazza, 1917. Piazza's lawyer argued that she had good character and ran an orderly house. Nonetheless, their victory was moot since prostitution was made illegal in the city of New Orleans in 1917 due to pressure from the federal government that was seeking to protect military personnel from vice and prostitution during World War I. Both residents and customers deserted Storyville, and the once high-end neighborhood eventually became a rundown slum. White lost her mansion at 235 North Basin Street and spent the remainder of her life relatively penniless. Both Lulu White and Willie Piazza were forced to close their brothels forever. After the closure of Storyville in 1917, Piazza continued to work as a prostitute and procuress. Unlike many other madams of her era, Piazza managed her money wisely, owned her own brothel, successfully speculated in real estate, and accumulated wealth that kept her comfortable in the years after the district closed. She lived at the mansion she built at 317 North Basin Street in New Orleans. Piazza died on November 2, 1932 at age 67. She had a sizable estate. Lulu White was staying at Piazza's residence at the time of her death on August 20, 1931 at age 63.